Maeve Brennan was beautiful, she was glamorous, she was witty, she lived an interesting life, and frankly, none of that would matter to me except that she was also one of the best and least remembered Irish writers of the 20th century. She wrote with a quality of tenderness and a quality of pain, a sort of throbbing residue of memory in everything she wrote. And I had barely even heard of her when I was approached to write this play. And as soon as I started immersing myself in her work, I was just seduced by the precision and sensitivity of her prose. Writing a biographical play is always tricky. You don't want to trawl through the decades. So my script doesn't focus either on Maeve's childhood as the daughter of a famous revolutionary father, nor on her years of decay and dementia and homelessness. I focus on her glory years, the 1950s in New York. And in a way, the play moves between her New York lifestyle, which was so high speed and glamorous. She knew everyone and she was really the queen of the New Yorker magazine. And it moves between that and the much more private, internal, softer and more painful elements of her Irish short stories. The play is about Maeve Brennan in the 1950s, but also about some key men in her life. Her legendary editor at the New Yorker magazine, William Shawn, Charles Adams, her colleague there and a notorious cartoonist with whom she had an affair, and the man she married, St. Charles McKelway, a wonderful journalist who concentrated on eccentric criminals. I suppose the paradox that really drew me to Maeve Brennan was the way she lived in two worlds at the same time. She'd be partying in glittering New York in the 1950s, and then she'd be going back to her office late at night, sitting up all night smoking and writing these painful, tender, memory-filled stories of the Dublin of her childhood. I connected with Maeve Brennan the minute I began to immerse myself in her work. She's a Dublin girl who emigrated like myself, but unlike me, she was so extreme. Extreme in her writing, extreme in her vices, her chaos, her excess. She lived on the very cliff edge. And that makes her a much more interesting person to write about than the kind of sensible writer who just does it 9 to 5. This is my first play in about a decade, and it is thrilling to be getting back to theatre because, as a form of writing, it is so much less controllable and predictable than any other kind. The kind of interaction you have with an editor is nothing compared with the sort of shifting sands of creativity and collaboration that you embark on when you work with a theatre company. Although Maeve Brennan only worked in prose herself, I think theatre is the ideal form to talk about her life because she lived so intensely, so dramatically, and so interactively. She was a famously good conversationalist. She was witty. She was sometimes rude. She lived very publicly and vividly, but also had this incredibly intense private commitment to her writing.